Hello, everybody. My name is Carrie Go, and my guest today is a religious trauma specialist from the Sunshine Coast in Australia.
Good job.
She helps religious trauma survivors go from being triggered, self-defeated, and stuck in a rut to transforming their lives with mind-body neural training techniques and consciousness education. Sounds a little bit complicated, but she's going to explain in a minute. Welcome, Stevie Noah. Thank you for joining me at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yes. Thanks for having me, Carrie. It's great to be here at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you.
Nothing a little coffee can't fix.
Stevie, before we talk about religious trauma in more detail, tell us how you got interested in such a specialized work. Take us through your own personal relationship with religion.
Yeah. Well, mine started many, many years ago, as you can imagine. I was born and raised in a tiny town in Washington State called Soap Lake. So we lived out in the country. We lived on a cattle ranch. There was maybe 1,500 people in the population of the actual surrounding area. So really, really small area or small town, I should say. And so we were homeschooled out on this cattle ranch out in the middle of nowhere. And, it was very little house on the prairie style. So got up in the morning, did our chores, weren't allowed to eat until chores and prayers and devotion and those kinds of things were done. Then we got to eat, then we had to do schoolwork. And then from there, it was more work all day. And of course, church in the evenings, and not every evening, but Wednesday nights, they'd have it. If we were doing specialized things, we'd have it. So church and work were our basic foundation, if you will.
And what's the name of the denomination? Is it like, sorry?
Good question. Yeah, it's the Assembly of God Church. Well, so when I was a little girl, my mom had broke off from Catholicism and became a Baptist Christian.
Okay.
And so she thought that was the real deal. And then when I became a teenager, we went into the Assembly of Gods, which is the holy rollers, the rockers and rollers. They speak in tongues and fall down and dance all over the church and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So yeah, so we've kind of transitioned a bit, which made it very obvious to me at a very young age that there was something kind of not quite right about it.
Right.
Because we were always like praying for my grandma, who was a Catholic, because she was in the wrong Christian religion, and then we changed, as I said. So it was like, well, how do you actually pick this? Because I always think that if they're in their denomination, it's the right one, and there are no other ones, or should be no other ones. And yet my best friend was a Lutheran, right? She lived down the road, rode horses together. She was a Lutheran, and the other one was a Methodist. And it was just like, I don't know about this. So I started questioning it at a very young age, which got me in a lot of trouble, of course.
Yeah. But isn't practicing a religion a positive thing? I mean, all religions teach us to be kind and loving to one another, do they not? Now, how does one become traumatized as a result of a religious belief?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, yes, there's obvious good aspects to, just being a good person, of course. You don't need religion to be a good person, but one becomes traumatized because the basic emphasis, the foundational belief system that they build religion off of, is that you are wrong and you don't deserve anything good unless you appease the God or the deity that you're after. So if you imagine this, you're born, one of the first things you learn in any Christian type religion, so whether that's Mormon or whatever, anything that you're in, that you were born a sinner and unworthy of the love of God. That's the foundation. And I remember learning that when I was I think it really hit me because, we kind of go into these when we're around 3, 4, 5 years old. Our brains are still, we're still really taking a lot in. And it's around 7 that we kind of now become that person, right?
Yes.
But at that 3, 4, 5 years old stage, we're really getting into our individualization. We're realizing that that we have to be good to make mommy happy. You know, we don't just get everything we want like a baby. You know, we have to actually start being a bit more of an adult, or a bit more of a human being, if you will. And that's when they really hit you. So the whole time when you're really, really young, you're always inundated with God loves you and you were made perfect and you're all this wonderful things. And then all of a sudden in Sunday school, you get the real deal. And you find out that you are a sinner and that you're unworthy of God's love, and that you now have to become saved, get baptized, and walk this thin line that you'll never ever figure out and you'll never ever see. And you got to try to guess what God wants for the rest of your life, or you're going to burn in hell. And the stories that they tell children from that point on they're traumatizing. They're scary. They're visceral. Because as you know, in church, you know, there's a lot of singing, there's a lot of moving around, there's a lot of people gathered. So there's a lot of trance going on. There's a lot of, you know, when everyone in a group believes the same thing, you've got this whole energy wave of everyone sort of taking that in and believing that that's 100% true. And so those are when the stories of hell come in, and how you're a bad kid. And if you don't be good, you're going to go to hell. If you don't get saved, you're going to go to hell. And hell is this torturous, horrible, you know, they tell the stories, they show the videos, they do all those things. And so it hits you really at a very, very young age. And from there on, you're kind of like, well, I'm not even good enough. Like, what if he kills me? What if I die and I'm not good enough? And so you've got an existential crisis as a child, which is, it's just not fair, right? It's not fair to children to be learning these things and to think that. The other thing is that anytime they can use that. So there's a lot of verses in there that they can use against a kid or punish a kid with, because now you're not just learning, right? Like when let's say you don't do something that mommy and daddy told you to do. Let's say you did it differently, or whatever, you get in trouble. Instead of mommy and daddy going, well, okay, you're a kid, you did this wrong, here's your punishment for it, or whatever. Or, you know, because my parents were very much into grounding or giving extra chores or verbally, whatever, all that stuff. It's no longer just that you're a kid figuring it out. It is now that you're going to go to hell. And if you die tomorrow and you've done this thing against mommy and daddy's will, you've now also gone against God's will, because mommy and daddy are closer to God than you. There's a hierarchy, of course. There's God, there's Jesus, there's the preacher, there's mommy and daddy, there's the people in the church, and then you come very, very last. And so now every time you get in trouble, or you're growing up and you're learning and you're trying new things, now you're also a sinner, and you're getting these check marks, you know, that you're bad, and you've got to repent and repent and repent. So this consistent repentance as well creates an OCD-like behavior, because God is, they paint him as this man in a throne up in some, you know, heaven space that you've got to please. You're never really sure if you're pleasing him or not. You can't. How could you? It's all very convoluted, and, you know, it's all based on someone else's idea of what God is. But as a kid, you just believe it all because you have no choice. You know,
is it still happening right now? I mean, this is like
100%.
a page out of a film, you know, like in the olden days. I thought religions have evolved, whatever denomination have evolved since then. You know, I think like the first image that comes to mind is the Amish and the Mormons. Are they very much? Yeah, they're very much like that. Okay.
Yeah, like I've never lived. I mean, they all have their different things. So the Mormons, for instance, have their Book of Mormon. And so they go a lot off of that, but they still have, I mean, that's all part of the whole basis. Any religion, let's put it this way, any fundamental religion requires you to believe that you are broken and you must get fixed. And this deity out here is going to fix you.
Right. And you didn't find that you could talk to your mom or dad?
Nothing.
You know, born to serve man, you mean?
Yeah. Like literally born to serve men. And that was the story that I got fed, you know, like you might as well not go to school. Why are you even bothering thinking about going to college? Because you're just going to get married and be somebody's wife anyways. That's your
Wow, I
duty.
can't believe this is happening in the USA. It's supposed to be the most liberated country in the world. You know,
Oh,
equal rights for women.
No, when I got to a teenager is when the purity movement came through. So this guy, this young preacher, wrote a book. What was it called? Now I can't remember. I should have wrote it down. Anyways, anyone who knows the purity culture knows this guy, Joshua Harris. Joshua Harris. He wrote this book called "I Kissed Dating Goodbye." Now, Joshua Harris created a movement in the States when I was a teenager where we had to go and get, basically, I had at that point gone on a few dates. I'd kissed boys. I'd been promiscuous, that kind of thing behind my parents. I mean, I was constantly in trouble, constantly. So, because I was rebelling and I was like, but this isn't, all of this other stuff looks like fun. My parents were always repenting and they were poor farmers and they looked really, they seemed really sad. And I wanted to go with the people that were partying and having fun and having adventures and that sort of thing. Anyways, purity movement comes through. And all of the Christians took this on, especially the fundamentalists, what I was in. And we had to do these ceremonies. So I had to go do a ceremony in front of everyone and put a wedding ring on my finger that said, and tell everyone that I was re-virginizing myself and that I was going to devote now my life to God and marry God until the day that I actually do get married and my dad hands me over to the man that I marry. And then I can take that ring off and I can put the other one on. So I had to do all of this really embarrassing stuff in front of all these people. And it was just mortifying, shaming. My mom was, family's always, mom mostly, because my dad worked so hard in the fields. My mom was the one that was home with us all the time. And she was the one that was crazy about God so much and all these rules. But they were worse than that. Like a lot of little girls, like they were taking 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old girls, even younger. It was ridiculous. And putting them in wedding dresses and doing a ceremony where their fathers danced with them and married their daughters, did a ritual where they like married their daughters. In this ritual, it was like the whole point of it was that the dad was now in charge of the daughter's virginity and that he was going to have to protect his daughter's virginity until she got married. And this was happening as I was like becoming of age and all that. And I was flabbergasted by the whole thing. I couldn't understand it. It all seemed wrong. And yet at the same time, I was struggling with an inner turmoil because I was fully indoctrinated with the fear of hell, was fully indoctrinated with the fear of God. And I thought that I was just made wrong and bad. And because I constantly wanted to do the opposite of what I was told to do. And that's for me when the nightmares started, that's for me when I got the visceral, paranormal, crazy nightmares. So that transitioned me. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So your parents must have been horrified when you stood up to them. I don't know what you did. What led you to cut yourself? Are you still in touch with your parents then, or have everything's forgiven now?
We put it on the back burner. Let's put it that way, because my parents they're genuinely good people. They're not awful people. They just have belief systems that are a little bit whack. So we just don't talk about it anymore. And it really only happened when I finally had to put the end to it, because for years I just let them consistently keep trying to get me to become a Christian. Okay. And I think it was about 4 years ago only that I finally just like boundary time. I've had enough, that we've argued about it for many, many years. And I finally just went, I'm not arguing about this anymore. It's over. Don't even try. And they stopped, which is awesome, which is great.
Okay. Well,
but it did
good.
take a while.
Yeah. So I didn't realize that you were originally from the States. So now you are practicing and helping others who had similar experience, because you obviously can relate. But is there a community in Australia where you are locally that, or I don't know, you do your work virtually, online?
Yeah, I do.
So are there Australians who have gone through similar experiences like you have?
Yeah, I've got a few of them right now. Yeah. So Australians, New Zealanders, UK a lot, America the most, and even South America, actually.
Oh my gosh, how
And
interesting.
Africa. Yes. Africa. Oh, man, I'm across the globe now. So
Wow. So
everywhere.
what are some of the symptoms of someone? Can you spot one who's experiencing religious trauma? I mean, how are they different from other forms of trauma, right? So we have many forms. It's you're very specialized here. So which I like, because they say you gotta know your niche, and then you know who
Yes.
you want to target and who you can help. But
Yeah.
how do you differentiate between someone who has been through, specifically religious trauma or non-religious trauma?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, religious trauma shows up. It can show up like PTSD, where there was a specific event that really got someone. Like the first time they heard about hell can be a very specific PTSD event, because the church has put on a big play, that sort of thing. Mostly it shows up as CPT, so complex post-traumatic distress. Wait, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Thank you. There we go.
Yeah. Okay, PTSD.
So it's layered. It's like an onion. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is where you've had many, many, many layers, many years, many repetitive events, traumatic events. A lot of them are emotional. Obviously, a lot of them are mental. Some of them are physical, because in the Bible, parents are allowed to smack their children around. That there are pastors and preachers and people that get away with sexual activities in a church that go unmentioned, right? That kind of stuff. So a lot of that too. But there's quite a lot of, everyone sort of manifests their particular trauma in a different way, or they struggle with it in a particular way. But the majority of us have this overarching. So there's nightmares. Obviously, that was my first.
Yeah.
Like demonic, visceral nightmares where you wake up and there's like demons on your throat holding you down, right? There's impeded development. So because you're not allowed to ask questions, because you're not allowed to not have faith, because you're not allowed to have healthy skepticism or make decisions, because you have to do things like everybody else does, and you have to choose the friends that you're only allowed to choose, and all these sort of things, you actually do have brain changes. So you have impeded development in the brain. A lot of adults with religious trauma have a very difficult time just decision making. They also have been taught to ruminate on how unworthy and how bad they are, and if they're doing the right thing, and what other people and their God think. They're always worried about what's going. So so most of them feel, first, they don't make decisions. Secondly, they're afraid because they don't know if they're making the wrong decision or how other people are going to feel about it. And then they go on and on over. They repeat things in their head consistently because they've been taught to repeat prayers. They've been taught to repeat, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And so those things happen. Obviously, staying in hypervigilance like that, consistently stressed out, and having a trauma loop going on and on and on because the fear of hell is so real, then creates other loops. Body stress, you can have somatic issues because of that. A lot of women have a lot of feminine issues because of it. Sexual issues, men and women sexual issues. You're taught your whole life that your body is a sin, that you shouldn't be using.
Oh gosh, so familiar.
And then you get married because you did the right thing, and all of a sudden on that night everything's supposed to change, but you don't. Your subconscious mind, your unconscious mind,
unconscious guilt. It
doesn't switch off like that.
Right.
So
so
confidence issue.
Talk to us about your method. You've obviously learned it somewhere. It's so technical. Neural training techniques and consciousness education. Let's unravel these techniques.
Good question. So Look, everyone is kind of different. I'm about to start doing a group coaching. It's taken me a while to figure out how I can get results with the group the way that I do one-on-one. But for people, for one-on-one, basically what we do is we take the first few biggest issues and we start to knock those out. So you do that by figuring out what you want. And most people with CPTSD, or at least in this genre with, religious trauma, they have no idea what they want. So no clue, haven't asked for it, are afraid to ask for it, and feel selfish and guilty for even wanting a good life.
Right. They're so used to putting others people's interest first before their own.
Yes.
They don't even know what they want. They've never been asked what they want, right?
That's right. Because you were born into a role to play. My role was female. My role was to get married, right? Now my role is that and be a good Christian wife. So we start with that. So what do you want? And most people don't know. So we figure that out. What do you want? And typically at the very start, it is to get rid of the depression or the anxiety or the nightmares or the triggers or that sort of thing. So I teach them techniques to, because disassociation is a huge thing with them. They're very always out here and they're never in their body. The body was a sin. The flesh was a sin. So they're always sort of far, far away. And so I bring them back into their body and teach them to learn how to feel their feelings in a way that allows them to start playing with the nervous system. So I teach them, the nervous system loves colors, it loves shapes, it loves sounds. It's like a child in a way. It's very complex and it's been trained in a specific way. And so to retrain it, we've got to get into what's going on with them in a fun way, not having to dig up the past, not having to get into tears and cry, that kind of thing. We play with the nervous system. We see how the memory's been stored, where it's been stored in the body. And I teach them how to feel that. And as they begin to unlock these little doors, if you will, inside of them, they'll, within a session or maybe two, they'll end up going out and with their friends, and social anxiety is a huge thing as well, by the way. And they'll just all of a sudden be present because they're like, that they're in their body, they're having a good time, they're focusing on their friends, they're not out in this fairyland worried about what they're going to say and how God's going to take it and what, all that sort of thing. So they come back in as they begin to retrain their nervous system, the guilt goes away, the shame goes away, and the excitement starts, the passion for, well, if that can go away, if I'm not having nightmares anymore, if I'm waking up feeling pretty good, what else is possible? And then teaching them how to make decisions, how to trust their decision, how to have new relationships, build new relationships with people, even from their past, how you would handle those kind of people, that sort of thing. So yeah, we start with the nervous system. I teach them the basic building blocks of that. And then from there, we may be doing, depends on the situation with the client. We might be working with a bit of hypnosis, which is really just, or transfer, just relaxation, getting into the unconscious mind and reteaching it something. And then there's always the Hebrew learning. It's really important to repeat what you want. Just like I teach them, I go, you already have these skills from church. You know how to repeat things over and over and over again. Let's teach you how to repeat something you want so that the nervous system builds that and that becomes the normal repetitive playlist, that sort of thing. And so, with sex and those kinds of things people are quite difficult, that can be quite difficult for some people. It's bit by bit, it's learning to receive pleasure first. And that might be a great cup of hot chocolate. Right. And that might be a tickle or a cuddle or a snuggle with someone, or it's just little bits, because the nervous system is on hypervigilance and it can't take anymore. Like if you have an orgasm and you're all that stuff, it's too much for the nervous system. So it's bit by bit receiving pleasure. Most of us that come from a religious background are not allowed to receive pleasure. We need to be working for God and focused and stuff. So, so that's in a nutshell what I do.
Yeah, gosh, it's just so intricate. And I wonder how you manage to help in a group setting, because everyone's case is so unique, isn't it?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's more like a one-to-one kind of
Yeah.
a coaching and helping and supporting. So for you to come up with a way to help in a group,
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it. Just listening to you explain, it sounds like it's going to be a journey, a process. It's not something that can happen within a few days or a few weeks.
No. And it's an interesting thing because, as as a coach or a healer as well, you've got all these marketers out there telling you, well, you need to do all the groups, you need to do it like this, and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't work in every single niche, even though they claim it does. And it's taken me a very long time to figure out how I can create those kinds of results or help people. It's not me. I'm helping them create the results. I want them to have the tools to get the result.
Yeah.
And so it's taken me a long time, but yeah, I got it. I got it, but it took a while, and I was wondering if it was ever going to happen.
Well, you're clearly enjoying your work. You see, that is the first criteria of any successful coach or healer or mentor. So you get there. You're perfect where you are. So then you mentioned a couple of times about your nightmares. I love to hear more about your personal paranormal story, which sounds rather spooky, but pray tell us what happened and how did you manage to end it? Did you have some kind of a support?
No. That's why I do what I do. When I was going through all of this, there was no support. And when I did go and reach out to a counselor or a therapist or somebody, they typically, and they still do this, by the way, and this is something that has to change in the therapy world. And I just talked to someone who went through this the other day. Right. They blow this whole religion stuff off like it's no big deal. They blow right over it. Or worse yet, which is what happened the other day to this other client of mine, they tell you to go back. It's the only trauma where people are allowed to tell you to go back to the abuser, because they're like, it's your fault. You don't have faith enough. You need to get closer to God. It's your fault. What? So that constantly. And even in a therapy setting, if that therapist is Christian as well, or whatever, or they believe that faith is a good choice for whatever reason, they literally tell their client to go back to their abuser. And it's insanity. They're not listening. So when I was going,
there is a society's presumption that religion must be a good thing. No religion teaches you, lead you the wrong way. So so
but I don't know how that can even still go on. I mean, look at Islam, for instance. I mean, look what they're still doing to their women, and they say, oh, well, a lot of women choose it. I bet you they only choose it because from the day they were born, this is what they were taught, not because it's actual choice. So, maybe now it is as an adult, but only because this is the whole world they grew up in, and that's all they know.
Okay.
So yes, and I know
nightmares, Stevie.
Nightmares. Don't give me, yes. Okay. So my first nightmares, and this is, a lot of us have these same exact nightmares. So typically what happens is you go through, so you fall asleep. For me, it was the first time it happened, I just dozed off to sleep and my bed opened up from underneath me. I was wide awake. So I went from dead asleep, or I felt like I was asleep, to wide awake. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't do anything. And this black hole opened up underneath me, and I was being sucked in. All I could do was like grip the sides of my bed, and then it closed back up, and this demon figure thing jumped on top of me and started strangling me. And I was calling in my head. This is another reason why I broke free of religion, because the nightmares actually created a situation where I did what I was told to do. I was calling for Jesus in my head. I was calling for him in my heart, as they say. And he didn't arrive. He didn't show up. It wasn't until I was able to move my arm that thing ran off the end of my bed. And I, of course, woke up with heart palpitations, or, not woke up, but was able to sit up and was like, because I was already awake. I was wide awake.
And how long did that go on for? Like days, weeks?
15 years.
What?
15 years. Yes.
And you didn't tell a soul? You didn't get help from the local? I don't know,
I know.
what do they call them? The pastor, the priest.
Oh God, no, that was the worst one for me. I was not, so that happened the first night, and that went on every single night. Like, I ended up getting anxiety. Didn't want to go to sleep. Obviously, I was highly depressed because I was exhausted. I was in a situation, I was homeschooled, so I couldn't get out. The last thing I was going to do was tell my parents and the preacher and the pastor, because my mom already created a situation where she'd bring her church friend over, and they would sit me down in the living room, and they would just go on and on and on about me until I was in full tears, eyes puffed up, completely having to admit sins, or that I'm a terrible person, or what. I would just repeat all this awful stuff. The last thing I wanted to do was tell them, because all they were going to say was that it's my fault, and that I was afraid they were going to do an exorcism on me, is what I actually thought they were going to do. So I didn't say anything.
What saved you? So what was the thing that
many years later, traveling, I did talk to people, like some secular friends and random people. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody knew anything. They're just like, wow, that's really sucks for you. But it ended up being that I finally, I went to India. I went to South America. I went to Thailand. I had these dreams. I had my grandma committed suicide. My boyfriend died of cancer. I was 23 years old. I went to commit suicide myself. Like, you name it. There was so many awful things happening at that very young age. But for me, there's just something inside of me. There's just something inside of me that was like, no, I remembered being a little girl and being super happy and laughing and being adventurous and being courageous, and just, I wanted her back. I wanted to be me again. And I didn't know where I lost it, and I didn't know what happened. But look, I was literally on the floor, bottle of wine. I was drinking, I was doing drugs, you name it. Boyfriend had died, all the things. And I was about to cut my wrist, that could. So
oh my gosh,
yeah.
the time has grown so quick. It's 40 minutes. We'll come almost to the end of the show. But before you go, Stevie, could you leave us with a practical step for people who may be struggling to get over a traumatic event? It does not necessarily to be a religious trauma, but is there a simple practical thing that they can do, day to day, and they can see some changes within themselves?
Great question again. So the easiest thing I would say to start with is immediately ask yourself, is this, or what is the positive intention behind this? What is the positive intention behind this? Okay. So if you're doing a behavior, if you're doing a trigger, now remember, you're doing this. So yes, you didn't ask for the abuse. Yes, you didn't ask for your nervous system to be trained in this way. However, as an adult, we have to take the responsibility to change our lives. And a lot of people will be like, oh, well, you don't have, I kind of argue with other therapists around this, where they're like, oh, it's okay. It's not your fault. Feel the anger, feel the pain. Yes, you can, but you need to pick a day when you're going to stop. Because if you don't, it's going to continue, and you're just going to reiterate the nervous system that somebody else gave you. And that's not fair to you. That's not living. So you need to start by going, okay, if I got triggered, or if this person puts me off, or whatever's going on, what is the positive intention behind this? Because I guarantee you, your nervous system is trying to protect you. There is something going on where your nervous system is coping, and it wants you to be okay. So figure out what that positive intention is first, because then you start a baseline of what's right about you, not what's wrong, what's right about you. As soon as you do that, then you can start knocking some things out. Then you can start playing with the nervous system. Okay, what's the positive intention? Oh, it's trying to keep me safe. Where do I feel that? It's in my gut. Okay, and then you start playing with what we call submodalities in this field. And of course, it goes from there. But just start with that. Come from the basis of you are perfect. There's nothing wrong with you. What's the positive intention? And go from there.
Right. Quit blaming yourself and see there's something wrong with you. It's about self-acceptance, isn't it? Acknowledging and listening and just paying attention. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Stevie, for your time and sharing with us your fascinating work. I left Stevie's website address in the description box below for anyone who would like some help with issues around religious trauma. And I personally don't know of anyone else who is an expert, so I suggest you make the most of this opportunity and reach out to Stevie. And it's a wrap. Thank you, Stevie, for your for getting up so early in the morning to speak with me.
It's an awesome thing. It's okay.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. Bye for now.